Hello, friends and nonprofit leaders. It's Laura Zelke here, your host of the Your Nonprofit Life podcast. This was the slowest, fastest summer ever. And between you and me, I'm a little happy to say ta-ta to southern humidity and hello to fall colors, cooler weather, and sweaters. Bring it on. Can someone testify? I see that hand. Amen. Now, as we move into fall, I have a special treat for you. Again, I know I'm always giving you special treats, but think of it this way. My treats are organic, gluten-free, keto-friendly, and they have 0 calories. You're welcome. Today's treat is an interview with the founder of an animal humane society in Southern Texas. Now, you might not be familiar with this type of organization, so let me help you get your bearings. You've heard of animal rescues and animal shelters, right? And when you think about them, you probably think about pets like cats and dogs and that they rescue them. And maybe if you've been listening to this podcast, you might also think of birds, pigs, and snakes. So let me ask you this. Have you ever thought about what happens to abused and neglected equines like horses, mules, and donkeys? Or have you considered what happens, for example, when the owner of a horse loses her job and can't afford to take care of her well-loved four-hoofed friend? Well, the fact is, sometimes even horses need to be rescued and sheltered and maybe even rehabilitated. And that's where my guest comes in. Today, you're going to meet a woman who not only saw the need for a horse rescue, she decided to start a nonprofit to rescue, rehabilitate, and rehome abused and neglected horses. This episode was so much fun to record. My guest is the founder and executive director of the Blue Bonnet Equine Humane Society, Jennifer Williams. During our interview, Jennifer shares her passion for horses and how she ended up in the nonprofit sector, which, by the way, was never part of her life plan. Jennifer also has a rare genetic condition that's made running a nonprofit a little more challenging than it would have been, but it's also given her strength to be an empathetic leader. She shares in this interview about how she met her husband online back in the mid-1990s, which is something that we both have in common, and how her life changed dramatically after the birth of her daughter a little later than life than she was originally expecting. Finally, we discuss life as a nonprofit founder and how difficult but worth it is to build a strong, dynamic board. I can't wait for you to meet my guest today, Jennifer Taylor Williams, the founder and executive director of Blue Bonnet Equine Humane Society in Rocheron, Texas. Hey, have you ever wished you could hear some good news for a change? Well, I might have just what you've been hoping for. Welcome to Your Nonprofit Life, where we remove our rose-colored glasses and explore what leaders are actually doing to move their nonprofits from messy to thriving without burning out in the process. I'm Laura Zelke, Director of Member Experience for the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. Join me each week to explore the ups, downs, and whoopsie daisies of your nonprofit life. Let's get started. Jennifer, I am so excited to be able to interview you for the Your Nonprofit Life podcast. And now we're on video. So we're trying to get used to this whole new way of doing things. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And Laura, I'm excited to be here. I finally got to start listening to your podcast. It took me a while because life, but I have wanted to get to be on it since I heard about it. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, you know, the reason we started the podcast is because we used to do these things called the live cast. Do you remember that? Where we would get, I don't know, 12 or 15 different nonprofit leaders from the lab, and everybody would get like 10 minutes. And maybe if you're lucky, out of the 10 minutes, you'd have 5 to tell us about your organization. And it just was not enough time to really do justice to the work that you're doing. And also, I feel like what I love about the podcast or like the video cast or whatever this thing is that we're doing now is that I get to hear about your actual personal story getting into the nonprofit sector and how this all started. And we're good now. At the very beginning, I will have kind of given like a brief introduction about Blue Bonnet. And we had originally talked about possibly trying, now that we're doing video, maybe trying to do it out in the barn, but that's just not going to happen today. Why was that?
I so wanted to be out there, but it is really hot in Texas, so I would be a puddle of melted, sweaty goo, and that wouldn't be pretty. And Sunday, we got in a group of horses from a seizure case, including a baby donkey, and he likes to talk a lot, which is adorable. Like every time I'm in the barn, I just like squeal like a little girl, but
Oh,
not, you wouldn't hear me at all. You just hear him.
so has your daughter named the baby donkey yet?
Gone through many, many possible names.
Okay.
So we have not yet decided.
Okay.
Yes, and from things like Lamp, because she's 6, and so she just like looks around and goes, "Let's name him Lamp." Let's not, to Spotnik, which is a character in a TV show she likes. So we've kind of roamed a ways.
Well, once you finally figure out what baby donkey's name is, you'll have to be sure and let us know. And I am hoping that as part of the video anyway, we're going to splice in a live video from the barn that your daughter filmed, where she goes around and tells us about the different horses, and it is the cutest thing. So I can't wait to share that with everyone. But again, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for watching. If you're watching this, like, this is a whole new aspect here. We're getting used to it. So this is Dr. Jennifer Williams, the founder and executive director of Blue Bonnet Equine Humane Society. And I'd love for you to tell us just kind of briefly what your organization does.
So we are a horse rescue and welfare organization that works throughout the state of Texas. This means we work with law enforcement and animal control agencies to help abused, neglected, and abandoned horses and other equines. So that's donkeys, mules, miniature horses, miniature donkeys, giant donkeys, and we take in things of all sizes and shapes if they bray or neigh. And so we rehabilitate them, we retrain them, and then we rehome them and start all over again.
Well, I love it. If they bray or neigh, you help. And you said the baby donkey came from a seizure. So, and that's not a seizure. That's a what is a seizure? Let's define seizure for people who are listening and maybe didn't quite pick up on the what we're doing here.
Sure. So law enforcement agencies, and sometimes we as well, will get reports of neglect or abuse from concerned citizens. Sometimes they're horse people, and sometimes it's just somebody driving down the road and they look to the side and they see what looks like a skinny animal to them. And I always say I would rather people call if they're in doubt than don't worry like that we're going to be mad that you called and it was nothing, because I'd rather check it out than find dead animals later. And so we and/or law enforcement, depending on the county, will investigate. Sometimes we're able to educate owners, which is, of course, the best outcome. Teach them how to better take care of their animals, and they get to keep them, and everyone's happy. Unfortunately, sometimes law enforcement has to get a warrant and go in and seize the animals. And so that's a seizure. Sometimes we go with them and help round up the animals and document their conditions. And sometimes they just call us afterwards and say, "We have horses, can you come get them?"
Wow. I just think I just never thought about it. And that's one, again, I'm always talking about, well, one of the things I love about the lab, but, just to be able to learn about all the different organizations out there and what different people find their passions or their callings and they just do it. And it's what makes this world a better place, and I didn't even know that you could call or call on a skinny horse. And I have seen some in my life. I just didn't know that there was anything you could do about it except feel pity for the animal, and so it's great to learn that there are options. And so if, like, let's say I'm driving down the road and I do see an animal that looks like a horse that looks malnourished, you can see the rib cages and it hasn't been brushed and who knows who would I call? Like, I'm in North Carolina, I'm not in Texas. So who do you call?
Most times, it will, if it's out in the country, it will be the sheriff's department or the parish, county or parish, depending on what state you're in, sheriff's department. If it's within city limits, sometimes it's the police department and sometimes it's the animal shelter. Cities and towns are a little different depending on who's in charge. But normally, if say you were to call the police department because you just passed the city limit sign and it's right there, if they don't handle it, they will. If they don't handle it, they will definitely direct you who does.
Yeah, and that's helpful. I learned the same thing when I interviewed Wendy Peroni from Three Rivers Avian up in West Virginia. Same thing. You can do the same thing with birds. Like, I don't know. I don't consider myself a mean animal person, but I just didn't know that you could take action other than having pity for the poor animal. So before we get into everything that Blue Bonnet does, I would love to hear about your journey into the nonprofit sector. Like, is this something that you had planned on? When did you start getting, I guess, bit by the horse bug? Like, when did that start?
When I was little, when I was born, we lived out in the country, but my dad had inherited this horse who I thought was a giant as a little kid. And I was actually scared of horses, which I always joked as I got older that my parents wished probably stuck around. And sometimes my husband probably wishes stuck around. But we moved into town and a girl down the road was taking riding lessons. And I got to go with her. And then that was it. It was over. I wanted to ride all the time. And I remember probably being 11 or 12, somewhere in there, thinking that what I wanted to do when I got older is go to auctions and buy horses that nobody wanted, that were either skinny or untrained or whatever, and train them and use them as lesson horses and then sell them to lesson kids and go do it again. So I didn't really know there was rescue yet, but that was kind of the precursor. I wanted to help. And then in college, I studied equine science as a minor. And then I went to grad school and moved into it for my master's and PhD. When I moved to Texas for grad school, or actually, let me back up. When I moved to Texas, because I'd met a guy on the internet and we had been dating for almost a year of long distance, and we had actually met in person before I made the move. But when I moved to Texas,
well,
yeah.
I hope so.
That doesn't always happen. I've known people who made the move first, and I'm like, oh, but so, and that was in 96 when a lot of people still didn't even know what the internet was. So it was interesting getting to explain to friends and family who this guy was and why I was moving to Texas.
It's funny. I remember you sharing that and going, oh, we'll have to talk about that, because actually my husband and I yesterday, so we're recording this on June 16th. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to come out, but we just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary yesterday, and we met online. And so we actually got married in 96. We met on America Online, and it was the same thing. Like, people are you sure he's not an axe murderer? And you're careful, but it's like, gosh, by the time we find, we had a very short, ours was much shorter than a year, courtship. But you kind of feel like you know him. Like, I felt like I knew him before we ever even met. So then it was just kind of awkward for about 5 minutes, and then we were over it. So, so
That's about right.
So
yeah.
Where were you going? So you said you were in college, but you moved to Texas. So where were you before Where were you going to college?
I was going to school. It was, at the time, it was Northeast Missouri State University. It's now Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri. And I grew up in Missouri, so that was a couple hours from home. And I graduated. Let's see, the morning of graduation, we packed up. I had a little Ford Ranger at the time, and I went to graduation. And after graduation, my mom bid us well and went home, and my dad followed us like an hour down the road to have dinner with us, and then we were off to Texas. And when I got here, so I had no job and no money and, not much of anything, and missed horses. And I got a job, but I still couldn't afford a horse. And I was looking around, and another person I met online knew someone who needed help with her horses. And I jumped at the chance. She had Arabian horses, which have always been my favorite. And so I went out and met her, and the arrangement was I was going to work for her for the cost of a horse. So I'd get at the end, get to take this gelding named Flight with me. Unfortunately, and I knew nothing about neglect or abuse or any of that of animals really at the time, other than, you might see something on TV now and again. She turned out to be, at the time, we called them animal collectors. Now they're called animal hoarders, where they take in animals and more and more and more. She had dogs, a few cats. The cats were more manageable, many dogs and many horses, and she had no job and no income at all. And so over time, when we first met her, she was taking care of the animals, but she'd had a guy working for her that paid for a lot of stuff, and he left, and we started helping her out. And it just went downhill and downhill, and we had to part ways. And that was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done, because my now husband, at the time fiance, and I, we both loved the cats and the dogs and the horses out there so much, but we also couldn't be drugged down. I mean, she wanted us to start paying for everything for the horses, and we had no money. Like, he was still in college. I just graduated. We're both working minimum wage jobs. And so we parted ways. The story would take the whole podcast, but the short version.
So did you get to take the horse with you, or no?
Oh, in fact, a year later, we were in bed, like waking up, reading books, waking up in the morning, and my mother-in-law called and said, "What was the name of that woman you guys had helped out?" And we told her, and she said, "There's an article in the newspaper. Her animals were taken by law enforcement and she killed herself." And so we jumped out of bed and ran to town to get a newspaper and found out it was really surreal that someone you've known could find themselves in that situation, and then also find themselves so despondent that their only option is death. And there was that part of it. And then there also was the part where there's these animals that we cared about a lot, and we didn't know what was going to happen to them. It took us about a year to piece together what happened. And what we learned is that her animals were seized, and she got them back, and she moved. And they were going to be seized again, and she moved. And this happens a lot. I mean, we see this happen a lot, where people will know it's about to happen and they move to hide the animals. Because part of being a hoarder is a psychological compulsion to keep these animals and not let them go. What happened, though, the Flight, the gelding I was supposed to get, had gotten sick, and she was living in a horse trailer with the horses in a field around her. She overdosed him on phenobarbital, which is how you euthanize animals, and left his body laying out there. And that's why law enforcement got involved. And so I'd spent months trying to find this horse and all of them, and we learned that he had died. Wow. The only I want to say good thing, but the only semi-positive out of that is that's what led to all of her animals getting seized, the remaining animals, and I wanted to help them. So I started reading the law, and in Texas, JP, animal neglect in Texas is both a civil and a criminal offense, and it normally starts in civil court, where they determine if the horses are neglected and then what happens to them. And a JP has three options. He could order them euthanized, which is normally only if they're really, really sick. He can, or she can, order them sent to an auction, or the third option is they can send them to a rescue. So I was desperately looking for rescues to take these horses, and I couldn't find one. And so clearly being online is a theme in my life, because I went online and found other people who thought this was a problem in Texas, and we formed the first rescue I was with, and I'm now with Blue Bonnet. It's the second rescue I've been involved with, and it's been 22 and a half years, somewhere around 2,000 horses in that time. So we have definitely, I say I do things in flights like memory and honor. Yeah. And we've definitely helped a lot and continue to help a lot because of that experience.
So you don't have 2,000 horses, though, on your property. So can you tell a little bit about what, so let's talk about unnamed donkey as an example. So this was a police seizure of some animals, and you get the animals. So now they're at your property, and then what happens?
So in this case, it was a police seizure. Animal control was also involved. So they took them all to a holding facility and asked us for help. We don't have a farm or ranch for the rescue. Like, I have my own personal property, but there's no way I could have 20 or 30 horses even here at once. So we use foster homes, which dog and cat rescues use them a lot. In fact, when we started, started the first rescue I was involved with. I was in grad school, so I couldn't have horses. And dog and cat rescues were doing foster homes a lot, but horse rescues weren't. So we were one of the first, I'm not sure that we were the first, but one of the first organizations to start a foster home program. So we have people who apply and they get approved, and then they volunteer. Like our fostering coordinator will put out a message and say, law enforcement has contacted us about 10 horses. That's all we know, and who can help, who can take in one to foster. And sometimes we know more, and sometimes really we know they're 10 horses and we hope they're horses when they get here and not anything else. So our foster homes will take them in. We get them vetted. We pay for the vet care because most of these horses have not seen a vet in years, if ever.
Oh, yeah.
And the foster home will feed them. We help with some of the cost of feed. When we very first started, we didn't help with any of the feed that was on the foster homes. And as we built our budget, we reimbursed for more and more of that to make fostering affordable. And we will refeed them, get them healthy, and then get them evaluated by a trainer to see what they know, and either get them training so they can be riding horses, or if they already were riding horses, either way, they eventually go up for adoption and find homes with people who love them. We now have horses who are kids riding horses, doing 4-H or horse shows, trail horses, working cow horses. We had a pair of matched mules who went on to be driving mules on trail rides. And so we've got horses doing almost everything horses do. We've got some who've gone on to therapy programs and help kids and adults with emotional and mental and physical impairments. And so it's pretty awesome. When I started this, people thought the rescue horses were used up and worthless. And there's still a few people who think that, but we work to change that attitude, and they can do everything that a non-rescue horse can do. They got a bad break in life. And we're here to help fix that and teach them to trust people again, and get them back on their feet, and then find them people who love them.
I just love that. And again, it just is educational to me to know that these types of organizations exist. I guess I always think of animals, generally speaking, I think of them as healthy and loved and doing great. And if somebody has a horse, they're taking care of the horse. It's very rare that you do see one, that's not being taken care of. And I'm so familiar with dog rescues and cat rescues. I know my sister and her husband for a number of years did boxer rescue, the boxer dogs, and they ended up keeping a couple of them. And but to take on a horse, I guess it's where you're located. So you're in southern Texas, right? Is it southeastern Texas?
South central, right south of Houston. So
okay.
Kind of between Houston and Galveston on the map.
And so are there a lot of ranches around? Is it people who do they all have ranches, or how does one qualify? Like you said, they have to apply to be a foster horse person. What do you call them?
We just call them foster homes.
Foster home. Okay. So to be a foster home, what are the requirements that you have?
We have an application for foster homes, which can sound intimidating, but really what we're looking for is a place that's safe. And we also want to make good matches. So our fostering application asks about the property. We want to have enough space. And people ask how much is enough, but it kind of depends on how many horses you already have and what you're willing to do. Like I had 5 or 6 horses for a while on 2 acres, which is fairly small. So I had to do a lot of management. And then if you have a bigger space, you don't have to do as much management, maybe as much feeding. A lot of my answers to people who want to foster are it depends, because horses, like people, are individuals with individual needs. But so we want it to be safe, like not a lot of trash in the pasture, fences that are falling down, some kind of shelter. In Texas, heat is a huge problem. So we want them to be able to get into shade and have fresh water. And then we ask some questions about the potential foster homes experience, because we want to make good matches. We don't want to put a horse with somebody that's going to be too much horse and get somebody, horse or human, hurt. But we have foster homes who've never had horses before. We just work really hard to pair them with the right horse. And we do a lot of mentoring and training, all the way through professional trainers who will foster sometimes and help work through bigger issues with some of the horses come in. And so we say we really do welcome everyone. I love the story because she became one of my dearest friends. Years ago, I had a person reached out to us whose daughter had a horse who was ill, and she knew nothing about horses other than she loved all animals. And Regina wrote us and said, my daughter's horse is ill. We have a schedule to be euthanized. I don't want to euthanize her. Is there anything you can do to help? And we did not take in the horse, but we were able to give her resources. The mare, her name was Tulsa, died of old age 20 years later, I think. So they got to keep her. We gave her the education she needed. She made a donation to the rescue because she was grateful for our help. Then she joined the rescue because she was grateful for our help. Then she helped organize, I think, the concession stand at a fundraiser. And eventually she was our treasurer and on our board of directors and was involved. We lost her a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. But she was involved in the rescue for like the next 20 years because she reached out wondering how do you get help? And she ended up fostering, like she learned all kinds of stuff about horses because she came to us, and we are happy to help people learn more.
Yeah, I just love that. It's really like for the love, well, like you said, for the love of anything that brays and neighs. I love I love that. I was thinking back on the intro here, and I had mentioned your daughter going out and doing a video, and I was wondering if you could kind of set that up for us, and then we'll splice it in.
I have a 6-year-old daughter who's grown up in horse rescue. I did rescue a long time before I had her, so I think she came home from the hospital and I took her out to the barn. That's how long she's been involved in rescue. She has a pony, Radar, that we adopted for her, who I think is the love of her life. And she comes out to the barn and helps me feed. And one day she asked if she could borrow my phone to make a video. And of course, kids this age, like, that's so much fun for them. So I turned her loose in the barn with the video, and she starts talking about the different horses, and she goes through and I think introduces every single horse. She's also offers them for sale, which I have to later tell her we don't do, but she got it mostly right. And I'm really glad we can do this with her, because even if she doesn't stay in horses or stay in rescue, she is learning about helping both horses and humans. And so I'm really glad. And she's not the only kid. We've got a bunch of kids whose parents are foster homes or volunteers who come and help out at events, who help ride some of the horses, who participate. We have a training competition. They participate in that. And it's really neat to get to see the kids kind of grow up with the attitude of giving and helping.
Well, you're raising the next generation of leaders.
Right.
So what is your daughter's name?
Her name is Josie.
Josie. So here is Josie's video.
Hi everybody, this is me and my mom. My mom trying to pet our newest member, Tango. And this is our horse, Cranberry. She's already been petted a few times, haven't you, girl? She's the best horse around. She might be even better than Radar. See? That's her scared look. That's Mom, you're blocking him. See that little eye? That's Tango. See his little white fur? Now let me show you the other horses. See the sign? That says Nico. Oh, there's Nico, that silly horse. He's really picky about his food. And this is Taffy. She eats really fast. This is Freckles. She's kind of a jerk. And is our biggest stallion of them all, Galeno. And this is our foster stall. This sign says Foster. F-O-S-T-E-R, Foster. And this is our foster horse named Cranberry. Oh, Cranberry. Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Oh my gosh, that was the cutest video when she introduced that one horse and said he's kind of a jerk. I remember when you first shared that with us, and Nolani and I were kind of like sharing it back and forth, and we cracked up. It's just, I love just the authenticity going on with Josie. And we love Josie. She comes, she'll come, like sometimes if you're in book club or self-care, she'll pop in and wave and say hi. So we love when our members' kids get to kind of pop in and say hi during our online activities that we do. So raising a family, you moved to Texas, you started this. Josie's 6. and you've been there for 20 years. So she was born a little late in your life, I'm guessing. I know when I got married, I had my son I was almost 35, which they were giving me all the warnings. And I think you had Josie a little bit later, right?
I did. I was 40 when I had her, and when I found out I was pregnant, I kept telling my husband, people are going to say, we're so ridiculous. I don't want to tell anyone, we're so ridiculous. And of course, that's not what anyone said. Although his mother, he called her to tell her. And I think her response was, holy crap. And and then she called back later. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, and I love my mother-in-law. So nobody expected that out of us. And we kind of didn't at that point.
She is a very pleasant surprise. And I have to say, when you have a child a little older than your 20s, it keeps you young. So it keeps you young for sure. How's it been running your nonprofit, raising your daughter, that kind of came in a little late in the game? And you also have some other, like some physical challenges as well, right? And I was just wondering, how do you make all that work?
So I was born with ocular albinism, which gives me my super fair hair and skin, but also affects how your optic nerve goes from your eyes to your brain, and it results in low vision. For someone with ocular albinism, I'm fairly lucky in that my vision is a lot better than a lot of people's, but it's still right around the borderline of being legally blind, which means while I did drive for a few years, I no longer can drive, and I haven't in 20 some years, which is challenging with a small child and challenging running a nonprofit. And then you add in a very pleasant surprise daughter. So things have changed a bit, like early on, which I think is really pretty common with all founders. I worked nonstop all day, all night. My husband only saw the back of my head because I was sitting at the computer sending emails or, talking on the phone to people or out in the barn. And I had to put up some better boundaries, but that's really healthier anyway, whether or not you have a child. I'm lucky that since what we do is horses, she can come with me to so much stuff. We have a big event every year in October. She was 3 months old at her first Blue Bonnet Horse Expo and got her own little name tag and pushed around in the stroller. And she still gets to come and do those things with me. She calls it the Horsey Village because we have like 60 or 70 horses there. And she looks forward to it all year. We were just talking about the Horsey Village yesterday. And now that she's a little bigger, I don't let her ride the rescue horses, but she gets to handle some of them on the ground and help brush them. And she feeds them and names a lot of them. And so it's good with her. Like, it's fun to get to share that with her. And it's fun to get to watch her grow her own compassion, wherever she goes in life. I think that will really help her. As far as my vision, to start off with, this is how I've been since birth. So it's not that I had to make a big adjustment later on, like somebody who loses their vision or suffers lower vision later in life. It's also kind of what I know. It is not always easy, but it is what I know. Like I said, I can't drive, so getting to events means it's a family affair, whether I want it to be or not. My husband has to take me, so he has to be incredibly supportive, and he is. And sometimes I have to get rides. A couple of years ago, he was battling cancer, which he is now doing really well. But to get to events, I had to beg board members and volunteers to help me get there. And sometimes that can be a little frustrating, I think, for everyone, for me, but also for them. And things like donor lunches, like when I joined the lab, I started reading all the things we could do better. And there were donor lunches and asking for bigger donations. And I'm like, I don't know how to get to donor lunch. So there's things like that you kind of have to be a little more creative and work on. And unfortunately, their ableism is a issue where people don't think that people who have disabilities are able to do what other people are. And so I do fight that sometimes with volunteers even, or law enforcement sometimes, and that can be really frustrating. Hopefully we continue to educate people that I can do whatever I want. I mean, I may have to work harder and it may take more coordination, and like when my husband was fighting cancer and he was in the hospital, there was a whole lot of coordination in that to make sure she was taken care of, Josie was, and he was, and I got where I needed to be because he couldn't drive us. But you have to figure it out, or I had to figure it out.
Yeah, and that is a huge challenge. And I have a question for you. This is not pre-scripted or anything, but I'm curious when you were needing to reach out to others, did you use your board for that, or did you reach out and have friends help, or was it kind of a combo of both? Like, how did you do that? And I have a reason for asking because I have been involved in a nonprofit where the founder was having some major health issues and was heavily relying on the board to do a lot of personal stuff and not friends. And so it was just, I'm just kind of curious if that's the norm or like how you navigated all of that.
So with rescue things like getting to meetings or to our big event, I had rescue people help me get there for the most part. And a lot of the personal stuff like organizing Josie to school and home and who'd stay with her when I had to be at the hospital or getting back and forth to the hospital was my in-laws or friends, some of whom are in the rescue, but started out as friends and I made them join the rescue at some point. And there was some of it was he went to the ER on a Saturday night in the middle of the night because he was in pain and got diagnosed there in the ER. And we were just in shock. And I kind of also just threw things on Facebook and said, we're going to need help. And so there were some rescue people who brought meals and stuff too. And it was, a joint effort, I guess, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is, I think it can become a challenge sometimes when you are the founder and you get and you have a working board and everybody's kind of pitching in, that there's a fine line, but it's an important line, right? There's a difference between people on the board volunteering to help or you asking like for a ride to the board meeting or things like that versus heavily relying on like calling them because they're on your board to come clean your house or something like that. That really kind of is crossing that line of board. But like if they volunteer, it's different. Like that's kind of what we're talking about here. And I'm bringing it up because these things happen sometimes. And so we just want to be clear, like the boundaries are, board members, board related things if they want to volunteer and want to help out, but you don't rely on your board, when you're not well. You can't cross that line into it. If they want to volunteer, that's different. That's totally different. That's not what we're talking about, right? And hopefully a board would step up to the plate and volunteer to offer, to help and do what they can. But it shouldn't be like an expectation of a founder or an executive director that the board is, kind of at your beck and call. So I'm just putting that out there. Just putting that out there.
I was gonna say, you said something really important though, I'm gonna pick up on for a second, is it is really hard when you're a founder, the lines are a whole lot blurrier. I know Joan Gary likes to say nonprofits are messy, and they are. And then when you're still the founder or one of the founders, there was kind of a group of us, the lines are really blurry sometimes. And sometimes it's hard to, because people ask, like, we start looking at who we can talk to about the rescue. And I'm like, at this point, almost everyone I know is involved. I mean, it's partially because I'm a founder and partially because I've been involved for 20 or we're 16 years old. So 16 years in this organization. It does get really fuzzy and hard to navigate sometimes.
Yeah, I bet. And so, and for a long time, you were what we call the trifecta, right? You were the founder, executive director, and the board chair, all wrapped into one person. And that is how a lot of nonprofits start. And we know that. But I know in the lab, we're always just kind of encouraging, like, pick either executive director or board chair, but like don't have both of those positions because you can't have your twin engine jet that way. You can't have the co-pilots if you are the, you keep getting up and switching seats, right? So how have things changed since you've now brought on a board chair and you are just basically, you're the founder and executive director, but you have a separate person who's the board chair?
We decided that we would have co-chairs because everyone, I think, was a little intimidated to step into a board chair position when I was leaving it. Because part of it wasn't that I was like the best board chair ever. It was really that there were a lot of blurry lines between what was I doing as a board chair and what was I doing as an executive director. And I also made it pretty clear that whoever took that on in the beginning would have to work with me as we figured this out. And so we had two people come on as co-chairs, which helped because I could bounce things off both of them and they could bounce things off each other and then come to me. And we are 2.5 years into this, I think. And so we're still somewhat finding our way. One of our board co-chairs, the Nonprofit Leadership Lab has the board boot camp, and one of our board co-chairs is taking that with me, which is really nice because then we can watch the classes and then talk to each other about kind of how things are working, and maybe sometimes where I'm stepping over the line, or maybe sometimes she feels she's stepping over the line. And so it really helps to have somebody who understands going in that this is going to be messy and that you need to work together to figure it out. And there'll be times I write her, I'm like, I'm not really sure if this is me or you. So this is what I think needs to happen, but which one of us needs to do it? And sometimes she'll do that to me too, which is also really nice. Several of our board members, including our board co-chairs, also do day-to-day stuff outside their board position, which again makes it messier because sometimes they're my boss and sometimes I'm their boss. And we are working to move away from that so that, you know, it's a little more clear who reports to who, because it does get messy. But I feel really good that we're making strides to outlining who does what and how we talk to each other.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have board co-chairs who want to learn, you know, and want to do a really good job and want to set the organization up for the next set of board co-chairs to have a hopefully slightly easier time of it. And it's been an adjustment. I know the first probably couple board meetings, I spoke way too much because I was used to speaking as both ED and board president, but I've gotten better at, you know, biting my lip and being in my place because the executive director job is huge by itself. The board chair job is huge by itself. I kind of drug my feet because I was a little scared in the beginning to make that change. And then I got to where I wanted to make the change. And then Joan Gary in the lab confirmed that I should make that change. And then I had to kind of get the board on board, you know, in line with that. But I want somebody to talk to and go, hey, this is a problem. What do you think? Talking to yourself is not nearly as satisfying or get you as far. So I'm glad that we've got good people working on this with me, and we'll get there.
Well, I just, I love it. I think you've been a member for a really long time. Did you come in with the very first group?
First or second, it was really early on.
Yeah, it was early. And just watching you develop as a leader and watching your self-confidence and your elevator pitch just improve over the years, which it always does. You know, it does anyway, right? But like the concentration that we do with the training, I think kind of helps accelerate it a little bit. And it's just been really cool to watch. And you had something really neat happen. I think it was this year, but it might have been last year with Purina. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Last fall, A Home for Every Horse put out a call for stories about adoption for their website. And I submitted one on my adopted horse, Galino, and I. And they then wrote me and said, not only do we want to use it for our website, we're working on this promotion with Purina Feeds, and we want to interview you and Galino and have you be part of a Purina Feeds. Originally, it was going to be a Christmas message, and we kind of got pushed back a little bit because life happens. But they came out and spent the day, part of the day here. They came out and spent the day here, and then they went and spent the day with one of our board members who also fosters for us. And I got to talk about Galino, and of course, you guys get to see like, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes. I don't know, it's short. And they were here all day. So there's all kinds of stuff that you miss, and all kinds of times where they're like, stop, we're gonna do it from a different angle. Stop, say this, you know, whatever, or I'll say stop. I didn't like the way I said that. But I loved it. It was a lot of fun because I was working with professionals. I had my horse, who I adore, with me. And it was all about adoption and we call him my heart horse. He's the horse I waited for a long time. Horse people will get this, that there's normally, even if you work with hundreds of horses, there's a few that just really get to you more than others. And he's one of probably 3 in my life I've gotten to have. And he was adopted from the rescue as a 2-year-old that was a mess. And he's now 10 this year and is a pretty awesome horse. And so they came out and talked to us about adoption, and it was a great way not just to talk about the rescue, but about how adopted horses can be pretty amazing, and that people who want to get into horses should give adopted horses a chance.
Yeah, and I'll be sure and put a link to that video in the show notes. And also something new that I've heard you mention a few times is that you are now, and I don't remember exactly how you phrase it, but you are now working to help people keep their animals. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Horses fall into a weird category in our country. There are a group of people who sees them as utilitarian. They do ranch work, maybe they're race horses. There are the Amish and Mennonites who drive, who still use horsepower for getting places and maybe farm work. And then there's a group of people who see them as pets that they get and they keep for life. And both groups of people have relationships with their horses, even if they're utilitarian, because they couldn't do their job without their horse. And then you have the pet group of people who we ride and we love our horses. Some of us don't ride anymore, but they're also part of the family. Unfortunately, though, they are expensive to keep. You have to have the space or the money to board them. You have to be able to buy hay and grain and vet care. They have to get their hooves trimmed every 6 weeks. They're kind of like your fingernails, but you don't pull out the fingernail clippers. You have to hire someone if you can't do it yourself. And so they're not cheap. And we would see people getting in touch with us to give up their horses because they couldn't afford them for something short term. Or people who had a horse, they got the horse when times were good. Now the horse is older, maybe it's ill or injured, and the horse needs to be euthanized, but they couldn't afford to euthanize the horse. They'd want us to come get the horse, take the horse somewhere else and euthanize the horse, which is not fair to this animal who knows where he is, he knows where home is. And so we started out actually with a euthanasia program where we would pay for euthanasia for horses who needed it, who were ill, who were injured, maybe who had severe behavioral problems. We do say in our program that if we don't agree with the diagnosis or we don't believe that euthanasia is called for yet, we can offer to take the horse into our program and try to fix it. But we do pay for the euthanasia because it can cost close to $1,000 to have a horse euthanized and then dispose of their body, because you can't, unfortunately, just dig a hole with a shovel in your backyard. I think the last one I had to have euthanized, it was somewhere $800. That's a lot of money if you are out of work or
Right. Yeah.
you're retired now.
Sure.
So we had people reach out to us when we started this program and said, I know I needed to euthanize this horse, but I just couldn't afford it. And so we were able to prevent suffering for both the horses and the humans and help in a way that a lot of people hadn't been helping. We also started a gelding, which is neutering for equines program, because gelded horses and donkeys are much easier to handle. Their housing requirements are better and they're easier to train. And so if the person needed to rehome them down the road, it's much easier to find a home for a gelded horse than one who's still a stallion. Also, there are a lot of horses in the world and we don't need poor quality horses breeding. So that when we can geld those, we take them out of the breeding population. And so we started paying, we don't generally pay for the entire cost of euthanasia, but we pay for part of it to make it more affordable for people who, again, maybe they just rescued the horse. That was a recent case. They just rescued the horse. It turned out to be a stallion instead of a gelding, and they have all these other bills. And so we were able to help with that. And then the program that I'm probably the proudest of and we've done the most with is when COVID started, I went to our board and I'm like, here's what's going to happen. People are going to be giving up their horses. They're not going to be adopting and our donations are going to plummet. It's going to be horrible. We just have to put our heads down and hold on. And I said, I don't want people to give us horses that they could keep if they had a little help. And so we created a program where we help for 3 months, a maximum of 3 months, with hay, grain, or veterinary care, or some combination of that. We don't pay the entire cost because we try to make the money we have go for as far as possible, but we help out a little because I can't imagine having to give up my horses just because it's something that's temporary that I can turn around. But maybe right now I just really can't feed them. And I don't want those people to lose their horses to law enforcement cases. We also didn't want to be flooded with more horses than we could handle. And so what we did is we created this program to help specifically with COVID last year. We're like, if you've lost your job, if you've had COVID and had medical bills, if you've had reduction in salary. And it was, we helped like 20 people representing probably close to 60 horses. And those horses got to stay with their people. And so
Wow.
this year at our board meeting, I said, we need to do this just permanently, and if the money runs out in June, then maybe we can't do the rest of the year, or we can fundraise for more money. But if we can help, 10 horses stay with people, that's 10 horses we don't have to take in. And that's also like, your horses become like a dog who lives outside.
Right.
They're your friends, they're therapy, they're your kids,
Right.
learn
They're like part of the
responsibility.
family.
It's not your fault that you got divorced or lost your job or had a big medical expense, and to give a horse up that you love because of that, like that hurts to think about.
Yeah.
And I want to make that not happen. So I'm really proud of our board and us for creating this program and being able to help people keep their horses.
I remembered the first time I heard it in your elevator pitch, and I was like, that's new. Wait a minute, what? You do that? So you're really providing quite a service to your community, and to the horse population and donkeys. And I'm just curious, before we're wrapping up here, and I wanted to ask, you mentioned something about a horsey village and something that it's like in October, and what exactly is that? And are you doing it this year now that we're finally kind of coming out of COVID?
This will be, I believe, our 14th year. COVID kind of messed me up on my numbering, but putting on what we call the Blue Bonnet Horse Expo. And we say it is a fundraising event. It provides about maybe about a quarter of our budget at this point, between a quarter and a third of our budget, but is also really maybe more importantly, an educational event and an adoption event. So what the Blue Bonnet Horse Expo is it's a one day long event held in Taylor, Texas. This year it will be October 16th. We have people come from all over the state and from beyond Texas to come and learn from equine professionals, trainers, veterinarians, equine dentists, to come and talk about horse care and horse training, the educational part of it. We have vendors who are coming to sell horse decor and horse tack. We sell donated horse equipment, donated art, donated horse and Western and ranch themed jewelry and clothing that's all donated. And we have an auction in the middle of the day of saddles that are donated. And then we also have what we call the Blue Bonnet Rescue Horse Training Challenge, where professional trainers and horse lovers work with one of our horses for 4 months to get them either going under saddle so that they can be riding horses, or work with them on the ground so they can have better manners and be closer to becoming riding horses. And then they come together and they compete over an obstacle course to show how the horse listens and handles new things. And they do what we call a freestyle, where they get to dress themselves and the horses up in costumes and put it to music and show what the horse knows. And it's super fun to watch. At least a few seconds I get to see of it while I'm running back and forth. It's really fun to watch. And then all those horses are available for adoption. So my daughter calls it the Horsey Village because we will have between 40 and 70 horses, depending on the year, there that are available for adoption. And it gets a lot of our horses into new homes. It helps us meet new people who might want to foster or adopt or volunteer in the future. Like I said, it raises part of our budget, and it provides education for $10 a person. My husband used to be the announcer before he had babysitting duty, and he said this, that you would pay way more than $10 to see any one of these individual clinicians do their thing. So you get to come see all of them. The clinicians who are professionals donate their time. We have some really great supportive people in Texas, and it is my favorite day of the year. I get to go shop for horse things. I get to see horse people. I get to pet horse noses, and I get to help the rescue. So it is the best day.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. It really does. And do you find that you're able to adopt out most of the horses, or, I mean, do people come with the intent of adopting a horse?
They do. We have an application for adoption. It's actually the same as our fostering application to kind of make sure the place is safe where they're going and to find out some about the person who wants to adopt so we can make good matches. And we have a lot of people who come who apply beforehand. They get pre-approved. All of our training challenge horses have Facebook pages. So like you would see, I'm not doing it, but you see Jennifer and Cranberry Sprite Facebook page. So you could follow our progress as we were doing our 4 months of training.
Cool.
And it actually it started yesterday. The official training period started yesterday. So all of the trainers and horses are getting their Facebook pages right now, which is so fun to watch.
Yeah.
You get to see them work together, and then it makes me want to go out and ride and play with my horses more, get all inspired. But a lot of people will follow their pages and fall in love, and they'll also see how they've progressed, and they'll come for that specific horse. Then we always have some people who come who've adopted in the past who didn't really intend on getting another horse, and they come and they see this horse that just jumps out at them and they end up adopting. And then we'll get some new people who come and apply that day. And if we can, we get them approved then. If not, we try to get them approved right after so they can take the horse home. But we
it sounds like just like a fun time. Do you have sponsors for this? Corporate sponsors?
We couldn't put our event on without sponsors because there's a lot of costs to just putting on the event. And so we set up a sponsorship program where it's a lot of individuals and some corporations and some foundations. We try to have a category, try to make sponsorship available to anyone because any size sponsorship matters. And we couldn't put this event on without our sponsors. It is expensive to put on. And the more sponsorships we bring in, our goal is to start the day at zero, not in the red for owing. Because we pay for the facility and every horse we have there costs money to have there. And so our sponsors, again, we just couldn't do this without them. And we've got a great group of people and we always welcome new people every year.
Yeah. I just think it sounds like so much fun. I tell you, if I lived closer, I would definitely be there. And I want to make sure that are you going to have links to all the different Facebook pages on your website?
We will eventually after
they all get set up. Yeah. So we'll make sure that there's links to that because I know anyone who's watching or listening would probably want to check that out. And so what is your website and is that the best way to get in touch with you?
Our website is bluebonnetequine.org or Facebook or Blue Bonnet Equine Humane Society. Either way is a great way to get in touch with us.
That's great. And so I'll put links to everything up on the show notes page and I'll have a link to the show notes for people who are watching the video. It's kind of new, so we're still trying to figure everything out. But I'm really excited to be able to bring this to you in different formats because learning about these nonprofits, I think it's enriching in our lives. And it's also just so cool to learn about all the different people. And, it's not often that I get to meet someone who also met their husband online and been together for 25 years or more. So, that's a rare club to be in right now. Probably in 10 years, it won't be so rare, right? Because we were the pioneers. We were out there making it okay to meet somebody online. Back when there were dial-up modems and floppy disks, right?
And when you didn't see the person, it was all text-based. Nobody gets that. We were trying to explain it to my nieces. No, there was no pictures. It was text.
Yeah. Oh, I have a funny story about my husband. So he's a computer nerd and I wanted to see what he looked like. And so he had his friend at work scan in a photo of himself, but then because internet was so slow back then, they made it into, I don't know, some tiny little thing. So when it came through, it was so small that if you made it bigger, he looked like some monster person. I'm like, you need to send me another picture. I don't even know what this is. And so then they rescanned it and it was so high resolution that when it came in, it was eventually I'm like, oh, he has blue eyes, right? It's like
Nobody
the lady
remembers
I
that.
worked with, because I was at work when I got that email, and I worked with the receptionist, and she kind of sat just like back, we were kind of real close to each other. And she goes, oh, he has kissable lips. And I was like, and I would have to agree. They are pretty kissable. So anyway, sorry, we kind of like diverged there. But, online relationships are a real thing, not just for marriage, but for online community and support. And that's how you got your organization started. It's what we do in the lab, build community with each other and get to know each other. Jennifer, I feel like I know you. I know that if I came down to Rochelle, Texas, I could come see your horses and pet them and take you out for some coffee or some lemonade or something. And that it would be just like right now, that we're building real relationships, and it's just important. We were doing that pre-COVID. We're going to do it forever, because these are real, genuine relationships, and I just love that. I love that about what we're doing in the lab. Personally, that's just me. And I wanted to thank you for giving me all your time today to do this interview. You'll have to let Josie know that she's going to have a guest appearance on a podcast, and that we'll have to get her feedback on it, see if she thinks we did okay. And you'll let us know what you all end up naming baby donkey. And I just, again, thank you for being on here today.
Thank you, Laura, for letting me come and talk about the rescue and my daughter and our rescue life here. I could talk about it all day. So this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you.
I bet. Well, thank you so much. And I will see you in the village.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. To access the show notes or share feedback on this podcast and link over to our socials, visit our website at yournonprofitlife.com. That's yournonprofitlife.com. And hey, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you're going to love The Village. It's our exclusive online community where we take what we're learning in the Nonprofit Leadership Lab and apply it. We take it to the next level with live Q&As, boot camps, online book clubs, and legit support from experts committed to helping you extend your nonprofit life. By the way, since we're just getting started, it would mean the world to us if you'd subscribe to the podcast and leave a great review on iTunes. The reviews will help us get the podcast in front of more people as we try to take the whole sector from messy to thriving. See you next time.